Mike Gibson, Roxana Mehran coming to you live from SCAI 2016, talking about the stentus, self-opposing bare metal stent in primary angioplasty for STEMI. Tell us about the trial.
So the APPOSITION V study is a study of using, for the first time actually, using a self-opposing, self-expanding nitinol stent, the stentus stent. It's a bare metal stent.
Tell us about nitinol. I mean, what are the properties that make it do this grow?
So it's obviously it has the property. Nitinol is pretty amazing. Obviously, we had it in I believe the wall stent. We also had Boston Scientific had a stent. I don't recall the name of it, but I remember using it. That's how long ago it was. It was almost over a decade ago. Where it is, you know, once heat is introduced, once it goes into the body, it starts to expand and it opposes up against the vessel wall. And if you can imagine, that could be really nice for STEMI. Think about it. So it's like you don't have to do a very big balloon dilatation and get distal embolization, so it could be safer. You do this
How quickly does it expand? I mean,
just immediately, as soon as you withdraw the sheath. And we do this a lot in periphery. A lot of the peripheral interventionalists are great operators for this because they know and understand how to use self-expanding stents. And so basically, as soon as you undo the sheath, it basically goes up against the wall. And over time, and if you can imagine, in a STEMI case, you've got lots of clot. And in a balloon expandable BMS or DES, or however you want to call it, and we saw this in Horizons AMI, what happens is that the wall the stent is expanded, but the clot is behind, in between the stent and the wall. And over time, as the clot dissolves, then you kind of have this little bit of a hole in between. And so that's one idea, that maybe a self-expanding stent would have the ability to grow and accommodate,
get rid of that hole.
Exactly, over time. And so that was the whole idea of doing this, and I think it's a great idea still to do this. Well, we did the APPOSITION V study, undertook this in a 2-to-1 randomization, working with HCRI and a great executive committee to basically, and with my co-PI, Maurice Bookbinder, to basically look at this with against the Vision stent, which is the only bare stent that has an FDA approval for STEMI. And we started doing this work, and it was amazing how slow the enrollment was. Many physicians did not want a bare metal stent in a STEMI case. And so it was a very, very slow enrollment.
Was it U.S. only or international?
It was U.S., for the most part U.S., and it was a U.S. pivotal trial. We had some international sites. But the U.S. enrollment was extremely slow.
U.S. enrollment is always horrible these days.
Slow, And so the sponsor, after a while, and they were developing their drug-eluting platform anyway, a sirolimus-eluting platform that they were working on, and so they felt like this was going to go nowhere, and so they stopped the study in July of 2014, promising that they would do full follow-up on everyone else. Then the DSMB met, and they also suggested to stop the study, and it was a lot
Which is interesting. This is always a big issue. When a sponsor stops a trial prematurely, they often want to dissolve the DSMB, and the DSMB has no real role. But it's interesting, the DSMB
No, we kept the DSMB.
Kept the DSMB and looked.
Kept the DSMB. We all insisted, because this was the very first time, it was STEMI patient population. We knew in the past that we needed to make sure that the operators at least didn't leave underexpanded stents. You know, if you have a self-expanding stent, you still have to expand it. You can't leave an hourglass and things like that. Anyway, as it stood, there were more clinical events actually in the stentus arm, and the DSMB did say to stop enrollment anyway, but it was already after the fact, and so it really, everyone was in agreement. And what we did find were extra stent thrombosis, acute stent thrombosis events, and acute and subacute in the stentus arm. And we did a very in-depth evaluation by the executive committee, myself, my co-PI, completely separate angiographic core lab, And then Elazar Edelman also did a whole model of self-expanding stents, because you really need to understand this concept for STEMI. Is it really
Sure.
going to work? And everyone came with the same conclusion that you can't leave an underexpanded stent in an artery that is laden with clot. You need to still expand the stent to the best possible diameter stenosis, and so therefore we know what the issue was, and it was a mechanical issue not related to the stent, and hopefully they'll continue to do further studies. The great news is that there were no increased death or more TLRs or anything different. The overall event rates were comparable, but the stent thrombosis rates were higher. And so, it was done well conducted by the sponsor. And so it's a really important study to talk about, and we felt that this would be a great venue to present it.
So Roxana, an important lesson in STEMI itself is when you have all that clot there, and when you're trying to size the stent, you may undersize it, right?
Right.
And you have a lot of vasoconstriction in STEMI, so you really need to kind of get the artery open. Although I'm a big direct stent fan, you kind of got to get a little bit of the artery open. You got to give some vasodilators. You got to kind of really look at that proximal reference segment and maybe oversize a little more than you might ordinarily, just because of the clot burden. I think that's an important lesson here.
There's no question, and I think that this kind of technology does have a huge promise in the STEMI patient population.
Right.
I hope that the sponsor doesn't walk away from this, oh no, this can't be done. I think in the hands of the right operators, and for us to actually pay attention, that a STEMI case has to be done quickly up front to open the artery, but it doesn't necessarily need to be rushed. That we really need to spend time. And when I reviewed these films, I was amazed of how much was left behind.
Yeah.
And so this was an important study to do.
Well, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
And thanks for presenting it. And thanks to all of you for joining us here live from SCAI 2016.